Okay, 2 minutes. All right. Dr. Sada, Rakesh, can I just hear an audio from you from your side? Let's see if we have all our speakers with us.
You are audible, very clear.
Okay, I can hear an audio from your side. All right, just checking in on to make sure we have our speakers. Ms. Bandana Patanaik, are you with us?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, you are welcome. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Jerome Alcantara.
Yes, present. Good evening.
Thank you for joining us, sir. Ms. Chandrika Karunaratna. Oh, hi.
That's right. Yeah. Hi, Kadi. Good evening, all.
Good evening. And Ms. Moomina Wahed.
It's Moomina. Hi.
Moomina, thank you. Thank you. You are welcome. And Ms. Anusha Munasinghe.
Yes, I'm there, and good evening and good morning to everyone from Sri Lanka.
Fantastic. Then I think we are all ready and geared to start. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on the Global Compact for Migration webinar Objective 10, where we will be looking at and trying to dive into in as much as depth as we can on preventing, combating, and eradicating trafficking in persons in the context of international migration. And you know, last week the topic was on smuggling, and one of the questions that we've always had, and I think those who work in migration circles would say, you know, when does smuggling become trafficking? When does smuggling become trafficking? So, you know, understanding the two sides of the same coin. And I think that we have a very able panel here with us that is going to help us dive into this. So I will not do so much of an intro because I think that I wouldn't even manage to preempt as much as our panelists have the capacity to, but just to say a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us. If it's morning on your side, good morning. If it's afternoon, good afternoon, and good evening for those joining us. I think particularly from Asia and on the west, on the other side of the continent as they head into the night. We are almost 200 people in the room, so just for a bit of housekeeping, we will ask that you mute your mics so that we can allow the bandwidth to take on the speakers. Unless you are speaking, then we will ask you to unmute your mics. For the presenters, you're welcome to show us your video as well as to just also give us and unmute your mics when you come on. And then I think you have all been capacitated as speakers to be co-hosts, so you'll be able to share any screen should you have any presentation to share with us. We also invite our speakers to share any resources and links as you present or after your presentation into our chat box. We invite all participants in the audience to feel free to share your comments, to share any feedback, to share any reflection, to also share some wow moments, something that has enlightened you in our chat box. We are having a look at that and making sure that the conversation keeps running and is engaging, but we can only engage as much as our audience allows us to. So please feel free to put your questions and we will do our best to ensure that our panelists can address some of the answers, or at least lead us to some kind of conversation around the questions that you will propose. So without without much further ado, I would like to also just recognize the presence of other people who are with us in the room. I see William Goss is here with us. I see also colleagues joining us from JRFDT and also from different parts. It's 26 pages to go through, so I may not manage to mention everybody by name. I see Professor Raya Pro. You are welcome. Thank you for being here, ma'am. And I see more and more names coming into the room. Thank you for joining us from many parts of the world and to this session on GMC 10. Without much further ado, we will ask each of the panelists to just give us, we will address a key question to them and then ask them to respond around that key question, which should be in about 5-7 minutes, if that is possible. That then allows us to come back to you with some kind of questions as we are running along. So I would like to introduce our first speaker, who is Ms. Bandana Patanik, and she is currently the international coordinator for the Global Alliance. Sorry, excuse me. There we go. She's currently the coordinator, the international coordinator for the Global Alliance Against Trafficking in Women. And last week, I think we had her colleague join us. And GATW is a feminist alliance that works on women's rights in the context of labor migration. And prior to GATW, Bandana was working in academia and publishing in India and in Australia on the subject of trafficking. Ms. Bandana, if I could just ask you to come in. You know, this year is marking the 20th anniversary of the Palermo Protocol. And what are your thoughts in terms of the progress that has been made so far in preventing, combating, and eradicating human trafficking? And so around this question, I think it would be great for us to hear also a bit more about the work that you do in your organization and what you think your work in the organization, of course, in partnership with others, and please feel free to mention those because we also have students in the room who would like to understand other actors. The kind of work that you're doing at GAAWT, what has made a significant contribution to the anti-trafficking movement? And here we're particularly talking about anti-trafficking of women over the past years. And you are, you know, please feel free to tell us, you know, some of Ms. Bandana, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Paddy, and thank you to MFA and all other colleagues for this opportunity. Paddy, you had far too many questions for me, so so I would like to go step by step. What I was thinking, and I'm very mindful of the fact that well, time is short, but also there is an online course that MFA is giving, so there are students. So what I would actually like to do in the first 2 or 3 minutes is to look at the text of GCM 10 vis-a-vis the Palermo Protocol and see where they diverge and where they converge, and then I'll move on to the next segment of my talk. So GCM Objective 10 aims to prevent, combat, and eradicate trafficking in persons in the context of international migration. So while trying to understand this objective, it's really necessary to look at it in conjunction with at least 2 other international instruments, namely the Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, otherwise known as the Palermo Protocol, and, quite importantly, the OHCHR recommended principles and guidelines on human rights and human trafficking. The protocol, as we all know, sits within a convention to address transnational organized crime. The OHCHR document is a set of strong recommendations which closely followed the Palermo Protocol. So GCM 10 commits to take legislative and other measures to, as I said, prevent, combat, and eradicate trafficking in the context of international migration by strengthening capacities and international cooperation to investigate, prosecute, and penalize trafficking in persons, to discourage demand that fosters exploitation, and to end impunity of trafficking networks. It also commits to enhance the identification and protection of and assistance to migrants who have become victims of trafficking. So the first thing to remember while trying to understand GCM-10 is that its specific commitments and the first two action points, which are the ratification of Palermo Protocol, and it also makes very explicit reference to Global Plan of Action and the toolkit of UNODC. So these two actually place human trafficking as it is understood within GCM firmly within the realm of crime. So GCM-10 also explicitly aims to follow the lead of UNODC and to strengthen the important work that UNODC has carried out to address trafficking over the last 2 decades. So while GCM-10 does not contradict the OHCHR guidelines anywhere, it also doesn't explicitly mention it, nor does it make any explicit mention of rights of trafficked persons. Secondly, it's also important to note that the scope of GCM-10 is narrower than that of Palermo Protocol. GCM's focus, as is its mandate, is on international migrants. Therefore, it limits itself to look at trafficking in the context of cross-border migration. Trafficking, as we know, can happen within national borders. Then coming to, I have a few specific comments on GCM-10 vis-a-vis Palermo Protocol. I think in some points, few of its action points, GCM Objective 10 does go beyond the protocol. Let's look at action point 3, for example. It's about international borders. It is very important for us to note that this objective is not recommending stringent border control measures as a trafficking prevention strategy. Article 11.1 of the protocol, in contrast, explicitly formulates an obligation upon its state parties to strengthen border controls. As GATW and many other organizations have pointed out on the basis of empirical research, stringent border control has done nothing to prevent human trafficking. It has only aggravated the vulnerability of working class migrants and have put many of them in harm's way. So the mild and rather vague action point of GCM-10 to monitor irregular migration routes can be seen as a migrant worker friendly thing. Let's just hope that this milder formulation does not become a sugar-coated legitimization for ongoing policing and surveillance of migrant workers. However, the second part of action point 3 is worth keeping an eye on. This can be a bit of a slippery slope. While talking about monitoring migration routes, this action point also mentions cross-border cooperation. If the kind of cooperation that EU member states are currently implementing is any indication, then this can easily backfire on migrant workers. Basically, in the name of cooperation, EU member states are funding countries of origin and transit to strengthen their borders. A glaring example of this is supporting and training the Libyan coast guards and providing them with surveillance equipment and intelligence. In the EU migration policy documents, these are justified as the need to save migrants' lives and to combat human smuggling and human trafficking. This covert support for policing of borders obviously lets the state that funds out of the hook of any human rights obligations. So therefore, we will need to be careful that GCM-10 does not give further endorsements to such measures. Then action point 5, which talks about protection and access to justice, is definitely stronger than the provisions in the protocol. There are a few good case examples in this regard, which can be used in future. The most well-known, of course, is the European Court of Human Rights judgment on Chaudhary and others versus Greece, where the Strasbourg court actually found that applicants were victims of human trafficking and forced labor. We can also look up to the OHCHR guidelines for further guidance. Then we can come to action points 7 and 8, which are also worth looking at. Here too, the assistance measures are certainly more strongly worded than they are in the Palermo Protocol. Note the injunctions to avoid criminalization of migrants who are victims of trafficking, non-conditional assistance to trafficked persons, temporary or permanent residence permit, and access to justice, including compensation. Coming 18 years after the protocol, the drafters of GCM had the advantage of the experience during these intervening years and several other sort of policy documents on trafficking in persons, including the Council of Europe Convention, of course. Action points 9 and 10, I would argue, are something to be very careful about. These are seemingly non-controversial and innocuous soft suggestions which talk about wide-ranging trainings, education, and awareness-raising programs. Everyone loves trainings and awareness-raising programs, NGOs, donors, everybody. The flip sides of wide-ranging education programs, which mandate everyone to keep an eye on trafficking, is that it gives everybody a license to become James Bond. There are many examples of community surveillance measures that have made lives of poor migrating people, especially women, difficult. There are examples of unethical rescues which have violated the rights of migrant workers in the informal sector. So we've come a long way from awareness-raising trainings that were talking about the horrors of trafficking. Millions of dollars and much efforts later, people in the anti-trafficking community realized that prospective migrant workers are actually aware of the possible bad outcomes of migration, but most of them are confident that it would not happen to them. It's that realization that made anti-trafficking community and many others in the migrant rights community to stop talking about horrors of trafficking, but to talk about safe migration information programs, or to implement safe migration information programs. While the efficacy of the safe migration programs is another matter, the framing of action point 10 of GCM is certainly a bit narrow. My last and final comment on the text and action points on GCM 10 vis-a-vis the protocol is with regard to their titles. While the protocol aims to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, GCM 10's expressed aim is to prevent, combat, and eradicate trafficking in persons. The military and medical wording like combat and eradicate and its limited focus on international migrants notwithstanding, we can argue that GCM 10 has a much broader vision. It actually hopes to see an end to trafficking. How it plans to do that is not clear from the action points, but we can certainly applaud the vision and work with the states to make that happen. Paddy, I think I will stop here for now and come back a bit later to share some reflections on the progress made so far. Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay. And I think I think you have really given us a great dive into the subject, even just by breaking down and pointing out what are those key points within that objective as well. You know, breaking it down for us, and I think also giving us a bit of a homework, isn't it? Especially for actors on the ground who maybe would have taken. And I like the last point that you made on you know, looking at points 9 and 10 that talk about this, you know, this awareness raising and how we can sort of get very locked into awareness raising and forgetting the complexity that goes with the issue of trafficking. And here I'm reminded of you know, I worked in China for about 3 years, and also following a bit on the concept of marriage migration and looking at it in the context of trafficking and how complex just that relationship can be. And therefore, when we are going into an awareness raising mode, what does that actually mean? So I wanted to just see if you could come back with us later on, you know, in terms of, you know, what you talked about, first touching on the fact that, you know, this cross-border element seems to be the big emphasis. So how do we bring in the internal trafficking? Because we do know that there are transnational links. So if they're linking both from the internal to the external, how are we making those linkages? And maybe a few examples of some of the work you have done could make it also easy for us to sort of see what are the natural linkages that could be done in addressing this from an international perspective, but dealing with trafficking in an internal context. And I think also touching a bit on, you know, how we can move in the right direction. So we move away from financing, capacity building, and awareness workshops where we know that there are deeply rooted issues and how we can really solve them, maybe by giving an example from, I don't know, a marriage migration angle or from a different angle of your expertise. And, you know, just as I leave you with that, just to say thank you for that deliberation that you have given us. And I will move on then to to our next speaker and just see if she's, yes, she is here with us, Miss Anusha, and I'm very careful to pronounce the names, but I would try my best. Miss Anusha Munasinghe. And she is the National Program Officer of UNODC Regional Office for South Asia and based in Sri Lanka. Ms. Anusha is a lawyer with a Bachelor of Law degree from the University of Colombo in Sri Lanka, and she holds a Master's in Public Policy and Management from Monash University in Australia. And I think she comes in really at the right time in this conversation, just as Ms. Bandana has broken down to, alluding to the work that UNODC has done prior to the GCM objective being set, and how a lot of the work around it is also anchored into some of the tools that UNODC has developed prior and also during this part. So we'll be really interested to hear from you, Anusha. Could you elaborate a bit further on the initiatives of UNODC in relation to the GCM objective number 10? And also if you can provide some sort of recommendations where you look at particularly policies and measures in relation to trafficking and trafficking in persons. Over to you, Ms. Anusha.
Thank you, Perry. Hi, everyone. I think you pronounce my name so well. Thank you so much. And I know the latter part is a bit difficult, but it went on well. So I think Bandana has set the scenario very well and put me in a little bit I should say a difficult situation as well. So anyway, when we look at GCM Objective 10, prevent, combat, and eradicate trafficking in persons in the context of international migration. So I want to look at this from UNODC's lenses. So she actually mentioned very important few facts related to UNODC as well. So how the TIP protocol, Palermo protocol, has strengthened the existing situation all over the world in combating trafficking efforts, and at the same time how certain by paying more attention to certain aspects like the final point you and both Bandana mentioned, by doing various activities for capacity building and awareness raising. Sometimes we complicate the problem. So, and how to avoid that, and especially by looking at the question you posed to me, how UNODC going to address that? So, as Bandana mentioned very well, the UN protocol, the Palermo protocol, is the most important instrument so far. I think embraced by I think almost every nation state and every nationality in respect of addressing issues related to trafficking in persons. So as almost like everyone in this room is aware, we have various paths to address these issues. One of the most important things I would like to highlight is the three-pillar approach in our the framework, UNODC framework. So we take this three-pillar approach by looking at prevention, protection, and prosecution. So when you look at those three pillars and when you look at GCM objectives, so as Bandana mentioned, there's a very clear this thing. So one is international and one is very limited to international. It's limited to international. The other one is international and domestic as well. So that is where we get a finer point to address through GCM. How are we going to address the internal flows, and then finally maybe certain internal flows will develop into the outward migration as well. So then how are we going to address those issues if we are looking at GCM Objective 10 only? And then when we look at our UNODC broad aspects, so we are looking at various components, like it's much more broader than anyone's organizational mandate. So we are looking at victim identification, we are looking at investigation of offences, we are looking at victim assistance and repatriation, training and capacity building, awareness raising and strategies and campaigns. So when you look at all these things, how are you going to fine tune the policy to address international migration, to address trafficking issues, trafficking concerns happening through that process, as well as the UN ODC tools are looking at domestic issues as well. How are we drawing that line? How are we going to draw the line and look at the GCM objectives only? And especially now when we talk about especially now in this context, I like to relate it to this context because we can't disregard the issues brought by this pandemic, COVID-19, and the changes it brought to migration process as well. There are so many things we have to reconsider, we have to retune, and we have to readdress, and we have to go back and see how we are going to address those issues, especially the international migration flows and how the scenarios have changed due to COVID-19. So if you take Sri Lanka as an example, you see certain the migrant workers have returned during the March, April, May. We call it first wave. So during that first wave, so they just started looking at another avenue to migrate. So then actually right now we are facing the second wave, and certain migrants are held up in their countries where they have migrated for work, especially Middle Eastern countries and various other South Asian and East Asian countries. So they are having a different set of problems, and the people who have come back has a different set of problems. So I mean, if you put the connection between what Bandana has said, so how are we going to address this everyone's issue by using the same policy? So how are we going to look at the policy through this newly So you are asking me something?
No, we've got you. We lost you for 1 second, but please go ahead.
Okay. So how we are now, when you say policy, there are two policy aspects we have to consider when we think about the current problem. So the people who are facing various problems related to their migration status in their host countries, and the people who have come back and who are like aspirant migrants who are planning to embark on this journey. So then how do we fine tune our policies, existing policies, to address especially the vulnerability factors brought by COVID-19? So that is the question I want to, like, as a agency who has the mandate to implement the most important protocol, I should say, even with its as many people suggest, with its various flows and the blockades, but still it's one of the most important instruments, the Palermo Protocol and the Organized Crime Convention. So how are we going to ask member states to look at the policy? How do you fine tune the policy to address the new twists and turns of the migrant workers in the aftermath of this COVID pandemic? By putting that question, I'm going to stop for the time being, Paddy, and later on come and answer questions and take the floor as it is necessary.
Anusha, thank you for responding to that question. And maybe I will also try and tag back at you here for your next follow-up question. Knowing the experience that you have, I mean, this is what I didn't mention, that you worked in the Ministry of Justice in Sri Lanka, and so you have that kind of you have that experience, and as well as the engagement that you have had, for instance, with the Bali process, and working in these different areas in terms of legal aid, access to justice, legislative strengthening, and so on. And you mentioned the 3 Ps there, the prevention, protection, and the prosecution. And so maybe you can come back to us and talk a little bit about that, because it seemed as though from reports over the years, I think countries have gone ahead to ratify the Palermo Protocol. Countries have gone ahead to also just sign up to a lot of different other, let's say, complementary instruments, whether it's at a national level or sub-regional level. For sure, I know that on the African continent, this is something that keeps moving in terms of trying to move that agenda forward. So ratification and adopting policies and signing on to frameworks at sub-regional level, at national level, has also been part of the play in terms of accessing financing for important things. So for instance, national action plans that are being developed on counter-trafficking programs. So I wanted to come back to you there, in talking about the prosecution part. It seems as though even from the European Union side of things, there hasn't been quite some improvement, even though it has been taken even to a high level where you have a senior representative from the European Commission that really holds as a special representative, but that the prosecution part seems to be a bit lagging. What has been your experience there, even as, from not just looking at your past experience, but also looking at the work that you do in UNODC in terms of the prosecution part? How are we moving along? How are we going? And what are the things that we can address? So you can come back to us on those burning and boiling questions that I have passed on to you, Anusha. Thank you. And now we move on to Moomina. Moomina, please do correct me if I do not pronounce your name correctly. Moomina Wahed is, before being appointed the Commissioner for a Human Rights Commission of the Maldives, she was recently working as a consultant on the delivery of labor and employment mandate in the Ministry of Economic Development. And during her tenure, Moomina undertook many tasks and responsibilities, which included, important things like formulating and implementing the process of transferring the employment mandate from the Maldives immigration to the Ministry of Economic Development. Sounds like not just a thing that you do with a piece of paper, but a lot of meetings and a lot of work and a lot of advocacy work, as one could imagine, since this was such an important policy change by the new government there in the Maldives. And subsequently, she also was in charge of the establishment of the employment approval process of expatriate workers. I could go on and mention some of the important things that you have done, Moomina, but maybe an important thing there I think I also need to add is that you have worked as a migrant workers rights focal point at the Commission itself, and therefore you are well placed to answer the question that we have for you, really looking at a rights-based perspective. And we would like you to highlight for us here, can we understand a bit about the barriers and the challenges that are encountered with working with key stakeholders in order to create this awareness, on issues that are related to human trafficking. So the question here, really coming from the Maldives, what challenges what challenges have you had in combating human trafficking, and particularly to migrant workers, and looking at also the current and the recent developments that you have sort of taken forward in addressing these challenges that are related to migrant workers and human trafficking. Over to you, Moomina.
Thank you so much, Penny, and you pronounced my name correctly. And in the first instance, it was not, but later it was correct. Okay, let me start with my presentation. I'll just, sorry, the video. Hi, everyone. Before just answering the question, I would like to give you a brief introduction or kind of a explanation about the current situation of Maldives. Maldives is actually party to 8 core international conventions, but Maldives is not party to UN Migrant Workers Convention to combat trafficking.
Moomina, sorry to intervene. I think we cannot see. Are you sharing screen?
No.
Okay, all right, okay, super. No, I
Sorry.
thought you had mentioned you were sharing screen, but sorry, just go ahead.
Yeah. To combat human trafficking, Maldives has ratified Anti-Human Trafficking Act, and though the act need an amendment to bring the definition of human trafficking in line with the UN protocol. Currently, the government is working on it, and I got the chance even to comment to that document. And just to give you a brief update on the situation, actually, the World Bank estimates that the inbound migrants in the Maldives have increased from 2,422 in 1985 to 94,086 in 2015. International migrants constituted less than 4% of the population in 1990, and it had increased over 25% in 2015. In that same year, almost 60% of all migrants in the Maldives has increased from Bangladesh migrant workers, actually. It's a huge concern, and currently the government estimates this number has been increased, kind of double the number. The majority of these migrants are employed in low-skilled labor, notably industries essential for the country's economic growth, such as construction and tourism. As you know, that the challenge that we have, that geographically dispersed, and this construction is mainly done in some resorts and islands, is a challenge that we have. Actually approximately 169,000 documented, and estimate that there will be around 65,000 or plus undocumented or irregular migrant workers. And this is a kind of a big challenge that we have at the moment. As reported over the past 5 years, human traffickers exploit domestic and foreign victims in Maldives, and traffickers exploit victims from Maldives abroad. It has been noticed practices indicative of forced labor, including fraudulent recruitment, confiscation of identity and travel documents, withholding or non-payment of wages, and debt-based coercions. Report says migrant workers pay approximately $2,500 to $4,000 for the recruitment. This again is a major concern. The work of the human trafficking mandate is guided by the Multi-Stakeholders National Steering Committee formed under Anti-Human Trafficking Act of Maldives. And 5 years National Anti-Human Trafficking Action Plan has been adopted by the steering committee. The concern is, in the Human Trafficking Action Plan, there are a lot of activities to advocate for the issues that we have and to implement standard operating procedures. However, the past 5 years, it was not running and not doing the job as it has to be. But however, now it has started again, and another action plan has been adopted. Maldives Police Services has a special unit for investigating human trafficking cases in Maldives, and also they have a different case management system and a referral system as well. Maldives Immigration has an anti-trafficking unit to investigate trafficking cases. Some of the barriers that, before highlighting that, I would like to let you know that Human Rights Commission has conducted various programs to increase awareness among the stakeholders and migrant workers. HRCM worked with stakeholders from government, international institutions, and with the Employers Association to raise awareness on the issues related to human trafficking. Some major challenges include limited budget resources and qualified and trained human resources in the sector. This includes the Human Rights Commission as well. This includes other implementing agencies as well. Due to this challenge, staff working in providing victim support and has a very limited knowledge, and It is a challenge to train the frontline officials on differentiating sex trafficking from sexual abuse and train immigration officers on social services providers to identify and refer suspected trafficking cases to police. Also training law enforcement and judges on investigating the cases of human trafficking and crimes, and application of anti-trafficking law is also a challenge. For this, we need adequate budget and resources. However, it's a challenge at the moment, and the new issue is COVID-19. I don't know what in the coming year also we will get enough budget to do these trainings. However, I think these online trainings and methods that we can use to overcome the challenge. HRCM has done quite a lot of things to address this issue. During the past 3 years, HRCM has disseminated more than 3,770 information cards, Know Your Right leaflets in different languages, including Malayalam, Bangla, Nepalese, and Hindi. These Know Your Right brochures was designed and translated in 5 languages, and this leaflet contains information about rights of every person stipulated in the Constitution of the Maldives. Disseminated this information on various occasions, and still it continues. We have also prepared and disseminated on-arrival information card, and this has been disseminated through immigration officials and embassies. Also in 2019, we had an employment forum, and this forum, in this forum, employee association, employers, and regulatory bodies has participated. Currently, we have started in this public awareness campaign on migrant workers, and this awareness campaign will also cover issues related to human trafficking. The new commission has also decided in the coming year to conduct a public inquiry, a national inquiry on issues related to migrant workers, as we believe this is a huge issue that we need to come up with some recommendation to the state and other agencies in order to address the human trafficking issues. Another challenge is anti-human trafficking mandate is changing to one government agency to another. While I was at the Economic Ministry, it was a mandate of Economic Ministry, but later the mandate has been changed to Ministry of Defense. So the investing to build the capacity of the institution when the mandate has changed to another has become a challenge. Another challenge I want to highlight is since we are geographically dispersed, capacity building of island councils and other officials working in the island is not very easy. HRCM has though conducted various programs in 2017 targeted to migrant workers and issues related to human trafficking. However, this training has to be an ongoing training, and we need to train the officials on SOPs for proactive trafficking, SOPs for proactive trafficking victims identification and referral to service is important. Another challenge I would like to highlight is that I think I have covered the last challenge that we have, that is the issue that we have that the National Steering Committee is not functioning well before, but now they have started, and I'm very much hoping that they will come up with more awareness raising programs, and they will start to implement these SOPs that they have formulated. And the revision that we need to bring to the Act is also important. The main constraint, as you all know, is the budgetary constraint and the human resources. this is something that we have to address soon, because we need the willingness of the state as well as other agencies. I believe the current government has done a lot of work to address the issues of undocumented migrant workers. For that, they have established another a steering committee to address the issues related to migrant workers. And then under that committee, that they have started the repatriation work, and as well as Ministry of Economic Development has started registering undocumented migrant workers. So this registration program is currently also an ongoing program. This will allow undocumented migrant workers to legalize their status in the country and get the opportunity to re-recruit from another employer. And during this COVID-19 situation, pandemic has brought some new challenges, and that I believe that the dynamic has been changed, because beginning, we do not monitor the accommodation standards, or that rarely we do the regular inspections of the workers to assess the workers' situations. But now I think the COVID pandemic has given an alarm to the state that we need to give more focus on these issues to address the issues of human trafficking and irregular recruitment and migration. For the safe migration, to advocate for safe migration, the government has reviewed the SOPs, and those SOPs includes quota, recruitment, and employment approval issuing, and penalizing if fraudulent recruitment has been done. So implementation, strengthening the implementation of these SOPs would allow to address the issues of human trafficking. I do believe that. I think that's all, Perry. I think I'll add on to others while we move on with the discussion. Thank you.
Moomina, thank you very much. I think that that gave us a very good perspective of the work that you're doing at the Commission, and I think it's ever so important to see those kind of efforts coming out from a commission like yours, and how you're working. Also, it seems as though the work that you're doing is trying to glue different parts of the government in understanding how to deal with the issue. And I think that's been a problem in a lot of different countries, where sort of inter-ministerial coordination becomes really an issue, and how you move it forward from, like you said, in terms of, even when you bring actors together in building capacity. I think some of the issues that you've also identified here, the limited knowledge that officers would have, border officials would have, but also non-law enforcement officials would have on the issue of trafficking, and raising awareness in their context, because in a way they may be the first line that a victim of trafficking may have met at a border, or in their line of work, and therefore that training remains particularly very important. But surprisingly enough, no matter if from countries where this kind of training is happening more and more, it seems as though that knowledge is not accumulated, that knowledge is not really being passed on. So I wonder, when you look forward into your plans in terms of training, how do you foresee making this much more sustainable? You've just mentioned an issue of funding as being a limited issue, but I'm also here wondering the kind of networks that you have had within the region, where you do more and more peer-to-peer learning. I think this is something that is being done in many parts, I guess, in the world. So maybe we can hear a little bit more about the future plans in making this kind of training sustainable, and maybe also putting it into the very what we would say the primary curriculum. As a border official, I've always wondered why that trafficking element is not part of a course that border officials would take, or that policemen would take, that nurses are also taking, you know, all those who would be sort of the first point of contact that a victim of trafficking would encounter. So I think it would be interesting.
Actually, I just want to add one more point to that. Actually, Human Rights Commission is conducting a training program to police officials, and the program that we have started this year, we invited immigration officials and other officials that we try to advocate this concept to them. But the problem is the change of people, you know, it's like very fast. The officials keep, if the officials doing that, the key people change, it's not very easy to again develop the capacity of the new officials. So there should be some mechanism actually in place within those institutions, that when the persons retire, or when the person changed the job or the position, the new staff that taking the lead should take a training course or initial introductory course that covers these informations, or covers these aspects of issues related to migrations or identifying trafficking victims and all those things. I think that's something that we need to advocate, and we need to find the underlying issue within the institutions, and also the underlying issues within the whole system to address this issue. Otherwise, for that, actually, we are doing the national inquiry, because this is kind of the most critical stage that we are in. The number of migrant workers has been increased, and undocumented migrant workers has been increased while we are doing the repatriation program. What if they identified a victim of human trafficking? So these things we need to actually discuss with the authorities and build the capacity of the authorities, that once they identified the victims of human trafficking while doing even repatriation program, should we do the referrals? Should we follow the referral process first, or just sending off the person to their home country? These protocols need to be something that we have to write and guide them. This is the best practices they have to follow.
For sure. I agree with that in terms of trying to see how you can make it, because turnover in government, in public offices, is something we cannot avoid. People have to change jobs, people have to retire, new people move in. So it's also about having a system in place that allows every officer who comes in line to understand the issues that are related. And like you've said, you know, migrant workers have doubled, you know, over the, you know, the numbers are doubling, and let's see what the post COVID pandemic looks like. But it seems some old habits will die hard, as people would say. So, you know, the numbers may increase more, and here we want to make sure that traffickers are not the ones that are winning in allowing migrant workers to move forward, but that they are also, you know, that they're also. So I was going to bring one question to you, which you can come back to us as I will go to our next speaker. And I wanted to find out from you, sort of in the formation of the national referral mechanism that you have mentioned, and in terms of case management and so on, of how much are the sending governments of some of the migrant workers involved? So how much are they involved in the referral mechanism? And here I'm talking more of a practical cases. Maybe you can lead us into one as we will come back, that talks a little bit about how you are engaging the sending countries as part of that, you know, in that system of the referral mechanism. So where, you know, a migrant has been identified, so from the identification to the time they're repatriated, and possibly maybe there's a reintegration of the victim of the victim themselves if they have decided to return home. And then another question that's attached to that: what happens around victims that decide to stay on in the Maldives? So what kind of how do we ensure that their rights are sort of that their rights are sustained? That's the one question that I had for you. And as you prepare for those questions, thank you again, Moomina, for giving us that presentation on the work of the Human Rights Commission from a Maldives perspective. I will now ask our next speaker, Chandrika Karunaratna. And Chandrika is a team leader from the United Nations Development Program that's based out in the office in Sri Lanka. And among other programs that she has worked on is the Joint UN program on prevention and combating of human trafficking. And I think she has been also involved in some work around the National Authority for the Protection of Victims of Crime and Witnesses. I'm particularly interested to hear on this one and the linkages that it may have to trafficking. But your question, Chandrika, here is maybe to just walk us through what are the strategies that UNDP has in addressing the vulnerability of migrant workers to being trafficked into exploitative labor. So here we're talking forced labor. And could you also tell us a bit more about how the implementation of the strategies can be further improved? Over to you, Chandrika, you're welcome.
Thanks, Paddy. I'm going to frame my question a little bit broadly. What I'll focus on is mainly on the alternative sort of mechanisms and remedies to protect and assist victims of trafficking in the absence of specific laws and regulations to combat trafficking, or where such measures or laws aren't effectively used. And in that process, I will also speak on what UNDP has been doing within this broader scheme of things. So firstly, most countries in our region and across the globe have, over the past 2 decades, introduced specific legal provisions to sort of combat trafficking by explicitly criminalizing it, imposing severe sentences for offenders. But what has actually been the challenge? If we do have all of these laws, if we do have all of these regulations on paper, what has been the challenge? It's the effective enforcement of these provisions that have actually been the challenge. And one of the challenges for the effective prosecution, investigation of these offenders is also, the challenges associated with obtaining evidence required to prove coercion or deception or fraud, which are the essential elements of trafficking. And also the ease of charging offenders under other ancillary sort of penal provisions, such as, for example, procuration or other sexual offenses. And also the use of the definitions of smuggling, the use of the term smuggling and trafficking interchangeably. This has also led to significant challenges in movement against trafficking in persons. But one of the most important factors is also the absence of the limited reporting by victims of trafficking or even witnesses due to a fear of reprisals or sort of limited access to judicial mechanisms. For example, if you take an international domestic migrant worker who has been trafficked, whose passport has been withheld or confiscated, whose movements have been restricted, she would not have an opportunity to even approach any kind of legal organization or the police or law enforcement for that matter. And purely by being a trafficked victim, she would be contravening the immigration laws of a particular country, extended her stay beyond the permissible time frame. And also victims generally, because of a lack of appreciation or understanding of the gravity of the offense or the fact that trafficking is in fact a heinous offense. Now, against this backdrop, and against the COVID pandemic backdrop in particular, the vulnerabilities have sort of exacerbated. And even if laws exist, enforcement authorities are unable to, or rather they're paralyzed and they're unable to effectively intervene because of COVID-related safety imperatives and distancing protocols and travel bans and so on. So it's been harder to detect like some of these illicit activities and provide the direct assistance to vulnerable communities, especially during lockdown and social distancing. And there is also a risk of prolonged exploitation, including in forced labor conditions or sexual exploitation conditions, especially because the offender knows that the potential to be detected are very slim under these circumstances where law enforcement is not able to effectively carry out investigations and operations. So they could exploit that situation further. And also the government's sort of response to victims with increased risk is also minimal within this context. So where the formal process, where the specific trafficking legislation is not proving effective, it's important, or rather I would say critical, to explore alternate provisions or mechanisms for assisting and protecting victims of trafficking. And especially where perhaps even law enforcement demonstrates a reluctance to pursue action as per the specific trafficking provisions. So what would be an alternate way to persuade sort of law enforcement to take action to investigate, prosecute, and protect, identify, protect, and assist victims? And this is also one of the key areas in which UNDP is intervening. I lead the justice sector program at UNDP, and we have a very vibrant program on victim and witness protection. And that looks at victim and witness protection in total, looking at all types of victims of crime, including victims of trafficking. And so how can we do this? We can look at one approach that I am suggesting, which I also find proving effective in the Sri Lankan context, is the sort of recognition given to the protection and assistance to victims of crime and witnesses in general. So how can we make the case, or what would be our strategy to ensure that the broad acceptance of the general victim and witness protection mechanism can be tailor-made to cater to the needs of victims of trafficking? So given that victim and witness protection is critical to the effective functioning of a criminal justice system as a whole, and it's an essential component of case flow within the penal chain, what perhaps can be done is to demonstrate the importance of recognizing the rights and the entitlements of victims and position trafficked victims within this broader framework of victims of crime. And also illustrate the aggravated circumstances surrounding the case of a victim of trafficking. For example, if you bring to bear the concept of deception, coercion, and so on and so forth. So as an example, if a particular offender refuses to release a victim, threatens the particular victim of trafficking, and through a menace of penalty, and that sort of discourages the victim from reporting the offense, that can be, we could suggest that it be construed as obstructing the course of justice, and that would in turn recognize it as an aggravated offense. So that can be one of the ways in which an alternative mechanism can be brought to bear to ensure that victims of trafficking deserve and do get the due recognition and attention that they require. And especially because it's a two-pronged approach. You penalize the offender and you bring the offender to task, as well as you go into detail into the specific protection and assistance requirements of a victim or a witness. And for example, take for example a sexual offense. Sexual offenses are recognized as ordinary offenses, right? But if it deals with sexual exploitation of a trafficked victim and that trafficked victim is prevented from reporting the case, then we could argue that it sort of creates an aggravated circumstance. And this sort of broad framework of protection and assistance is there before, during, and post trial as well. So you sort of can ensure the continued assistance and continued provision of assistance to victims and witnesses. For example, medical care. It can be physical, psychosocial support, protection for the individual if the particular victim is afraid of reprisals. And also, for example, this is where civil society organizations, legal professionals, and medical professionals can support victims in developing or drafting the victim impact statement, and where the impact of the crime is illustrated. The physical impact, the psychological impact, the financial impact on the victim of crime, or on the traffic victim, could be presented to court, and enhanced compensation can be secured for that victim depending on the impact of that particular offense. I won't go into detail, any more detail right now, because I'm also mindful of the time. But I just want to highlight one example, which I think is quite relevant in this context as well. This is actually a finding based on a study of the legal mechanisms available for Sri Lankan traffic migrant workers in Jordan, which I undertook a few years ago. If a victim of trafficking is identified, and with some support, governmental support or any support from a organization, a civil society organization in that particular country, the victim is repatriated back to the country. Because in most cases, victims do want to immediately return to the country, given the traumatic experience they've gone through. Once the victim has been repatriated to the country, and if a particular organization has undertaken the legal case and has been going to court in that destination country on behalf of the victim, and the court awards back wages for the victim, and if the victim has returned to her country of origin, there has to be some sort of mechanism where these organizations could liaise with a particular legal aid organization in the country of origin of that victim, and ensure that whatever the victim has secured through court intervention actually reaches the victim. So this was something that was identified as a dire sort of need, and against this whole backdrop where a large number of migrants are repatriated, some of whom who have been repatriated could be victims of trafficking, and I'm sure there's a large percentage who are not even reflected in the number because of the hidden nature of this sort of offense. So it's very important to look at partnerships, memoranda of understanding between legal aid organizations in countries of origin and the destination countries, to sort of look at how victims can be protected and assisted even after repatriation. And once a traffic victim has returned back to the country, it doesn't simply end there. It doesn't end with the repatriation. The reintegration aspect of it should also be looked at in a sort of holistic manner. So you need to look at alternative means of livelihood for those individuals, and look at the push and pull factors of trafficking to sort of ensure there is a holistic approach to preventing trafficking. Paddy, how am I on time? Can I go into one other point, or do you want me to?
You can go into one other point. Thank you, Chandrika.
Okay, thanks. So one point that I wanted to make was also the importance of not looking at the different objectives, the GCM objectives, in a siloed approach. And I think we all know this also, because the objectives are interlinked. So for example, it's important to the point I'm trying to make, the fact that limited reporting of the offense of trafficking is not an indication that the problem doesn't exist. We all know that. And so while we enunciate the importance of basing policy decisions on established data and evidence, we should not go by the number of reported cases, because that would not provide a sound and sort of empirical base on which to build policy. And objective one is about the collation and utilization of data as a basis for evidence-based policies. And here I wanted to mention that the emphasis should be on the accurate data and evidence on which we base policies and laws and regulations. So it's important to penetrate beyond the general reported cases to ascertain the actual magnitude of the sort of situation. So that's it. That's about all I want to sort of introduce at this point. I will go into some of the other points during our discussion. Thanks, Paddy.
Thank you, Chandrika. Very interesting to hear about, you know, sort of this alternative way of looking at, you know, when the prevailing situation doesn't allow us, you know, I think this is where you're coming from, that when the prevailing situation doesn't allow us to have effective enforcement, what else can we do? You know, what else can we do beyond us saying we're waiting for legal, you know, for legal provisions to be available, for the right frameworks, for the right structures to be available? But what else can we do in the meantime? And I think I really like the presentation that you have made in sort of looking at these alternative provisions that really go from identification, investigation, and it seems as well into prosecution. So I wanted to understand a bit what would happen around the areas of prosecution. Maybe you can dive into one of the examples. I know you didn't want to sort of go into it for a little bit too long, but you know, if it's possible to just dive in a little bit into that. And I wanted here to also point out the role that you have mentioned in terms of civil society being able to still provide, you know, the necessary requirements that victims need, even in the process of identification, even in the process of probably repatriation being organized and reintegration, and what the role of the sending country would have. So how far across would you stretch this sort of alternative route that we're looking at in terms of, you know, providing for the victim of trafficking in the meantime while we're sorting out sort of on the more structural basis? So I think we can come back to you on that. I think it's an interesting way of bringing out this sort of tailor-made situation, tailor-made alternative, because it is true that different cases of trafficking can be looked at also with different mirrors. I'm reminded with investigators of trafficking cases, and how just the perspective of exploitation was looked at by looking at a bed, you know, where some felt that two or four people sleeping in one room was a maltreatment of these migrant workers in this case, and another thought that at least they were four, they had a window, they had a door to it, and they even had their own shower and bathroom. So that somehow, sometimes also looking at it into the intricate details when we talk about, you know, trafficking, and when evidence is being brought out, and when the scenario is being looked at, is important. I liked your point also on data and how important that is. And I think in also looking at alternative sources where we can try to track where, you know, potential cases of trafficking could be. I think there was an interesting research a couple of years ago from Canada that showed how just receipts, or was it bank account deposits, were an important way of tracking victims of trafficking. So, you know, how do we bring in all these other methods? And all these are stipulated, you're right, in the GCM, and quite interconnected in a way, and requiring across the board cooperation, not just across the border, but across the board as governments, civil society, and also working together with other partners. So thank you for that. And maybe you can come back to us with the issues that I've mentioned. Now, without much further ado, we do have another speaker that should dive us in. And this time, we ask Jerome Alcantara. If I've pronounced your name correctly, Jerome, please do let me know. And Jerome specializes in labor and migration issues, specifically in combating human trafficking. And his efforts have been recognized by the US State Department, the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, and many other agencies. He's the executive director of the BLAS Opel Policy Center and Training Institute, which is a non-governmental institution dedicated to protection of Filipino migrant workers. And it works with stakeholders in rescue and repatriation of trafficked and exploited, and also looking at providing legal support and socioeconomic programs in terms of reintegration. So it really, I do see it going through the whole spectrum, Jerome, and you can take us through that. And I think Jerome can tell us a bit more about, you know, how the center models and promotes innovation in terms of effective delivery of services to not just potential victims, but those who and their families as well. Jerome, in your presentation, could you just also tell us a bit more about how your experience has been in engaging the different stakeholders in rescue and repatriation, because this is what everybody keeps talking about. We're all talking about identification, prosecution, but I like that we are coming also to you where we talk about the rescue and repatriation of trafficked and exploited migrants in this case, and also if you can tell us a bit more about the role that civil society organizations have played in trying to realize this GCM objective and the challenges that you often face as a civil society organization. Over to you, Jerome.
Thank you very much, Paddy. You pronounced my name perfectly. Thank you very much. Good evening, good day to all of the other resource persons and the participants to this webinar. I am from a non-government organization. We are part of an intergovernmental council that combats trafficking in the Philippines. This is mandated by our anti-trafficking law. It created an interagency council against trafficking. And part of the council are 3 non-government organizations representing children, migrant workers, and women. So we are one of the NGO members, and basically that's how we work with government. The OPLE Center has been around for more than a decade, and most of our work is centered on the rescue and repatriation of overseas Filipino workers. We are, as most of you may have known, we have one of the most strictly regulated, highly regulated labor migration management system in the whole world. We have a whole set of regulation and rules, and we also have very strict requirements for Filipinos who are going out of the country. But despite all of that, we still have most of the cases that are being handled by the OPLE Center are actually cases of trafficking of overseas Filipino workers who passed through legal quote unquote migration channels. So that's a question for us also. How can that happen? One of the assumptions really in formulating most of the policies and most of the programs is that if we, that's quite the traditional prevailing notion for government, that if we pass enough laws, that we come up with enough programs, that we have enough regulations, then trafficking, especially if they pass through the legal routes, would not be happening in our country. But in our experience, that's not the case. No, most of the cases that we've handled are those of Filipino migrant workers who actually pass through legal migration channels. Part of the work that we do is that we serve as like a bridge from the community up to the government agencies level. We have an active media and social media presence, and most of the cases of families who report of exploited or trafficked overseas Filipino workers, they come to us for help, and we help them navigate through the whole process. That's one thing about having a highly regulated labor migration management system, is that there are so many different agencies, and it's quite confusing for the workers and the families themselves to navigate through all of this. We have a different department for undocumented Filipino workers. We have a different agency which handles licensed recruitment agencies. We have a different agency which handles those who pass through legal migration channels. So it can get very confusing for the workers and their families, and that's part of what we do. We help them navigate the whole process. We help them. It's because it has become such a labyrinthian system. There are so many forms to accomplish. There are so many people to talk to. So that's also part of our role. We provide them with support. We help them fill up forms. And especially now during the pandemic, when most of the processes have gone online, our government has been trying to innovate. Some of the case reporting system has been transferred online, but it's still a bit difficult for a lot of people to navigate and to access. So we help provide them with that. We also help ensure that there is transparency and accountability in the whole process. In handling rescue, repatriation, and reintegration services, I think most of us have experienced delays, sometimes even fatal, tragic delays in the actions of government. So part of our role is to make sure that we help government come up with case referral guidelines. We help them upgrade their systems and their processes to make sure that they stick to a specific time frame, which we have agreed upon in terms of conducting rescue operations, in terms of providing legal assistance, in terms of providing aftercare services. But I have to say that this was before the pandemic. Everything is in disarray right now. Most of the systems, most of the gains that we have built through the many years of collaborating with our partner non-government agencies, organizations in the Philippines, it's like in a bit of flux right now. We don't know how it will be operating now up to a few months or a few years from now. So that's all, and that's also part of, I think, what the role of civil society and the academe has to be. One of our observations is that the Philippine, especially our overseas Filipino workers, was really hardly hit by the pandemic. There are 2.4 million Filipinos working overseas, and our estimate is that more than 1 million of them lost their jobs due to the pandemic, and more than 500,000 have already been repatriated. They've already been sent home to the here in the Philippines. So part of the problem that we are facing right now is how to detect and how to identify, how to screen who are the possible victims of trafficking from among those 500,000 Filipinos who have already gone home. And it's a daunting challenge, really. And there's very little that most of us can do because we are still in lockdown. The Philippines has one of the longest lockdown, I think, in the world. So there's still limited restrictions. So we are innovating as we speak on how we can help detect and how we can provide services to possible victims of trafficking who have been repatriated. And it's a daunting task. So government right now, I'm not sure if this is part of, probably later other countries can share, but we sense that the government is in a firefighting mode. They are putting bushfires here, putting bushfires there, and there's no really sense of coming up with an overall strategic plan in the future. And we are sure that the pandemic has changed the face of labor migration forever. And we are specifically looking at how the deployment cost has probably more than tripled or quadrupled for migrant workers. Transportation costs, plane fares have tripled. There's an increased cost in medical examination expenses, especially with COVID testing. And I'm not sure if employers are willing to foot the bill. And that will be part of the vulnerability of workers who will be coming out. And for us in the Philippines, our knee-jerk reaction really is there are a pool of unemployed, millions of unemployed right now because of the pandemic. So labor migration will again be the safety valve for our economy and for our society. And that's a problem because you will be faced with rising deployment costs. You will be faced with employers who may have also lost their a lot in the pandemic. So they might not be able or might not be willing to shoulder the expenses for their workers and might be negotiating for lower standards and lower levels of protection that what we have successfully lobbied for through the years. And we also have government's diminished capacity. I'm not. Our government is not really operating at its full capacity right now because they are, our embassies we have monitored have been locking itself down because most of the people are getting sick also because of the constant exposure. So it's also a cause of concern for us on how far government can take, especially in the context of labor migration, where we have really no option but to rely to governments of the Philippines and governments of the host countries to help our Filipino migrant workers. We're also very much concerned about the health of the legal, the financial health of the legal and legitimate recruitment companies, recruitment agencies, labor migration agents, because I think statistics here are something that there are like 17% of labor recruiters in the Philippines have already declared bankruptcy. And what would be available to the pool of people who will be looking for job overseas are mostly those who do not bother with the legal processes, do not comply with the law, and do not really care about monitoring the situation of their workers. So these are very difficult challenges that are up ahead that we will be facing. And I think it's part of the role of civil society, of the academe, and for basically most of us here right now to really prepare for that future, to anticipate that future, and to try to influence government, to try to influence intergovernmental and bilateral institutions to start looking at these problems, because this will be biting us sooner than we expected. So I'll probably stop with that and get ready for the open forum. Thank you very much.
Jerome, thank you for taking us through that. I am taking notes, and I am trying to pick questions as well from the chat box. So please, thank you very much for those questions that are streaming through for our panelists. Panelists, you are welcome to go through the questions on the chat box, but I will also bring them into our conversation now. But before we sort of get to our Q&A session, I just wanted to maybe just have a Jerome, as you will come back in either in the question and answer session, or as we will close later, you sort of talked about sort of this, the passing through the regular channels, right? That, even when we felt that as governments, as we felt it as even as at the local level that you have all the different loopholes filled in, I think what we often forget is that traffickers and smugglers are always one step ahead. It's like they already knew what you were thinking before you did it, and they would go ahead and find, even with the regular channels, find some other channels. And sometimes also the fact that you haven't had an available pathway, what remains as an alternative is for victims to fall in the hands of, for people who want to take that journey to improve their livelihoods, is to fall in the hands of traffickers, and in the last week, as we learned in the case of smugglers, and sort of to see, are they really providing an alternative route, that legal pathways are not providing. So I sort of thought, I wanted to bring this one back to you. And then another thing I wanted to bring back to you is to sort of this concept that you've talked about, looking at, post-COVID impact on migration, what it will mean for new migrants that are trying to make the trip, what it will mean for those migrants who have left their jobs. So this concept of being, stranded, then you become undocumented and possibly re-trafficked. Could you talk to us a little bit about, and if something that you have seen, with covering overseas Filipino workers, is this a trend that you have seen, or is this something that you can discuss us through, sort of looking at, trafficked, stranded, and then re-trafficked, and what this means? And before we have our panelists sort of responding to some of their questions and the Q&A, could I just ask a few prominent speakers in the room, and I will call you on the spot. Please feel free. We have Angie Tan from the Center for Migrant Advocacy in the Philippines. We also have Noel Aben from the Lawyers Beyond Borders from the Philippines, and Sumita, I think, is joining us from Malaysia. Sumita Kishna is joining us from Malaysia. So if you would like to give us just one or two words on your side of what you have heard around the topics we have discussed, looking at prevention, protection, and prosecution, and also just, covering the whole spectrum of, looking at internal trafficking versus trans-border trafficking, and what we're really thinking about this. So if you could give us your 1 or 2 minutes, I would just mute myself and allow you to come on as you feel. Sumita, if you are there, Noel or Angie.
Thank you, Paddy. I think my take on trafficking is based on our cases here in Malaysia. And I think one of the things that is lacking in terms of trafficking is the cross-border cooperation between the countries. I feel that when we get into a case, the countries do not, especially when it involves a victim, a migrant victim, the countries do not collaborate with one another to provide the support that the victim and the families deserve. A lot of time, the victim is set is in a shelter here, but then the families are back home, and they are also harassed by the traffickers, and they also go through a lot of problems while the victim is here in the shelter. And I feel that governments always ignore that part of the trafficking aspect, because when the victim is, or the victim's family is being harassed, and when the victim comes to know about this, by and large, we see that the victim is very much reluctant to continue the cases. So the cross-border collaboration between the countries to provide that kind of support is always missing. And this is, I think, something that the countries will have to take into consideration when they are trying to address trafficking cases, And also in terms of in terms of irregular migration, most of the trafficking cases it comes through the irregular migration, and but they do not address the root cause of the irregular migration. They always look at the trafficking, the irregular migration in a security lens, rather than why the migrant took the irregular route and how he became a traffic victim. So these kind of things need to be addressed first if you want to do a holistic approach to the trafficking issue. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you for that, Sumita. Spot on, on sort of cross-country cooperation in terms of, I think it's the whole spectrum, even comes from identification all the way, down also to prosecution, and how sort of that's happening. And actually looking from the migrant perspective, the reintegration aspect. I think you're spot on that. I wonder if Angie is with us in the room. Angie, would you like to come in? And then Innocent Duru, who is with Voice of African Migrants.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Paddy. This is Angie Tan from Center for Migrant Advocacy. What I actually messaged Paddy is I agree with Chandrika regarding silo mentality, because in the Philippines, despite the presence of a legislation mandating governments to share information, so that I believe that the first line of support should be the community. However, the absence of those information that should be shared within the government, from the national government down to the local government, causes problems, because the local government should provide support to the potential migrant workers by giving them necessary, relevant, and timely information. But because those information are not present or not available in the local communities, there seems to be a gap. And then later on, of course, we know what will happen, and we know what will happen next. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Innocent Duru. Okay, Innocent, we can bring you in later. Maybe I just have a question, as you, so maybe to the panelists, as we are, we're having we're in a sort of wrap up and Q&A session here. If I could just come then to Anusha. Anusha, we have a question for you that talks about, what are the challenges that are there to deal with migrant trafficking related to Tamils in Sri Lanka, given the domestic, political, and the social gap prevailing situation between the Tamils and the Sinhalese, and what are the main reasons for the trafficking? And maybe even as you will come in to give us any response, and this question comes from Dr. Tulika Goa, if you can come in and just also bring in this, the response to the question that we have asked in terms of looking at the alternatives.
Thank you, Paddy. Hope you all can hear me, right? Thank you. And yes, I mean, like when it's like turning the wheel entirely from 100 degrees. So we go back to the starting point. So what is the reason for these incidents to happen? So it is basically, I mean, I don't like to take it from divide it into various ethnic groups or various components. But if you take the problem, it is the the reason behind this trafficking, being trafficked, is poverty. And how are we going to address this? I mean, I fully agree with everyone who put forward their ideas. Like, it gives us the entire picture. But when we think about how do we address this trafficking happening in the migration process, and what is the solution for that? So then again, we are going back to the very basic point. Before coming to the second, the point you raised now, Paddy, I like to the point. I like to go back to the point you raised at the end of my session, and why there are less prosecutions. So I think Chandrika and Jerome pointed out various things, so I fully agree with them. At the same time, I like to say this as well, there are less prosecutions due to the if you take this as the process. So prosecution comes as the end point. So then what are the activities happening during from the beginning of the process? So do we conduct prevention activities effectively? So then we come to the most important point. Do we identify victims accurately? Do we identify victims properly? So if we don't accept identify them, if we don't accept their situation, as Chandrika very clearly mentioned, if we don't have evidence, if we can't build the case, how are we going to prosecute them? So that is I think the most important point we are coming to when we look at everyone's the talking points. So that is the very critical point. When we sometimes I think at one point you mentioned I think with our colleague from Maldives, the officers who come across victims for the first time, even with proper training and proper awareness, are they in a position to identify victims properly? And how are they going to handle them from that point of time? Are they going to collect accurate evidence to build up the case? Are they going to refer them to appropriate places for protection and assistance? So then, if those things are not happening, how are we going to build up a case? And how are we going to say we have adequate prosecution to prove that we are doing? I mean, everyone is telling, which I don't agree. So that may be the point that you are saying, the higher number of prosecutions to say that you are doing a good job. So I don't agree with that. So sometimes, as one of the colleagues mentioned, they don't want, I mean, the victims don't want to identify themselves and go before the court of law, because there are, I mean, like if you take all these participants who are here, who are in this room, so we all have various shortcomings in our legal system. Yes. So if I am a victim, do I really want to go to go through this process? I should say, go through this hassle. And if I'm not happy to go through this hassle, and it takes long time, lengthy legal processes, so do we expect others to go through this? And maybe one organization is doing their job very well, but what about others? What about other like strong institutions like the courts, or like the prosecutors? They need to follow the procedure. They need to follow processes. So if it is taking time, are we in a position to serve justice properly? So that is
Anusha, thank you for that. I think I think, like you have pointed out, it's not just about us recording the numbers of those that are prosecuted, but also understanding how cases are resolved. And maybe it's the terminologies actually that we have around, because if we're looking really at this thing from a migrant's perspective, it's about being able to make the next step to their life and moving on from this. And maybe we haven't done enough, and it's not captured well enough in just the prosecution as an indicator, if you like, or prosecution indicators, but that looks at cases that are actually being resolved. So maybe that's a challenge that we can take up for ourselves. And on that, maybe can I just ask, maybe for the other panelists, Bandana, I come to you, and if you could just respond in a minute to the question that I asked, and I think it's very much linked to the question that's been asked in the chat box there, that sort of talks about, you know, how awareness raising campaigns on stigmas on irregular migration if they're not handled sensitively. So Bandana, if you could respond to that, and then I will come to the next speaker.
Sure, thank you. It was very educative and very humbling actually to listen to everybody and to the points that they made. If you allow me 2 minutes, Betty, I would like to make one point. You know, just to strengthen the kind of things that all my co-panelists talked about. Today, we are talking about the latest estimated number of trafficked persons is 40.3 million. And you compare that to the number of global prosecutions, that's 11,841. And the number of convictions is even less, less than 10,000. So obviously, there's something, you know, there are a lot of weaknesses that everybody has pointed out. To that, I would add, we need to see how, you know, the other kind of cases, say, for example, rape cases or others, this thing where very vulnerable victims are in, you know, part of the court process. How do our legal systems deal with them? And what is this thing? So we need to see them side by side. There was an interesting point that Sumita made that, you know, the victim support from one country to another. You know, within the ASEAN region, for example, the definition of a trafficked person, a trafficked victim, varies from one country to the other. So even when we have an ASEAN convention, it's like one person who is identified as a victim is not in Thailand is not identified as a victim in another country. So there are a lot of things that we're dealing with. But what I really would like to point out is that, you know, there is a kind of, I would argue, it is important for us now to sort of, you know, to not to put in our energies to strengthen this crime control framework further. We can do all we want to sort of, you know, whatever mechanisms are put in place, we can do everything to sort of make that there implemented. But I think we need to move on to what we call everyday abuses that people are facing. We have to recognize that the trafficking framework is kind of, you know, is actually sort of, the framework is based on what we call exceptionalism. That trafficking is an extreme form of exploitation. Therefore, you know, the traffic victim should have X, Y, Z. When we're looking at the whole world of work right now, actually a huge number of people are facing abuse and exploitation that may not constitute trafficking, but nonetheless, they're not fundamentally different. They may be slightly different in degree. So it is important for us today to actually talk about the range of exploitations that happen. And it is really, really important for us to also remember that, you know, there is a reason why in the it was not a coincidence that the interest in human trafficking got stronger in the 1990s, exactly at a time when economic globalization was escalating in the world and the world of work was changing. It's not accidental that when state parties decided to take another look at human trafficking, the first one was in the late 40s, they wanted to frame it as transnational organized crime. Because by 1990s, when UNTOC was being discussed, most countries in the world had already adopted market-oriented reform policies, deregulation, lowering of trade barriers, reduction in state influence in the economy. So international borders were becoming a space that must be simultaneously open and closed. So open for goods and capital, but heavily regulated for movement of people. And states had to intercept criminals and defend their borders. And, you know, if they can, then protect the rights of the trafficked persons. And it's extremely important for us to remember that today. So rather, at that moment, rather than actually discussing their extractivist policies, they tried to address the problems of sort of, you know, they created a new crime control instrument, and a new narrative was born. So, just one more second. Yeah, one more second. So the only way to protect the rights of workers then became to protect the rights of victims, not the rights of victims. So today, it's a reminder that we need to actually shift this focus and need to look at the large number of migrating people, the large number of informal workers who are actually facing a range of exploitations. And I think that's absolutely important. So yeah, I would stop here.
And indeed, that would be quite important. And then I just bring in Moomina to come in on the human rights angle. I think it ties very, very well with what you have raised, Ms. Bandana, on that point. So Ms. Moomina, if you could just come in and wrap up for us your 1 minute.
Okay. I would like to answer first the question that you have given, how much the sending country governments are involved in giving support to the agencies. With regard to that, I would say that the language barrier is a key challenge that we have. For that, actually sending country embassies and the IOM offices working in those countries have given a lot of support in translating the awareness materials and other documentations that we have to use in the courts and all. So for that language barrier thing, that we do get support, but I wouldn't say that that is enough actually. Not as significant, the support has not been given in a significant level. For that, we need, as Human Rights Commission, we need to work with all embassies and other parties that work for this right in those sending countries to actually protect victims from this issue. The other thing is actually the police has given the referral system access to the embassies, but that's something they don't use. So I think something that as Human Rights Commission, I think in coming days that we can do is that advocating for this to use the referral system. So interagencies cooperation is quite important thing, which one of the panelists, I think Chandrika has raised this. So that's something we can do, and together, I think with all the authorities, with state authorities and other sending countries authorities, we can work to build the capacity of our officials as well, and also to raise awareness. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that interjection. Chandrika, I think you come in at a good time in terms of looking at this alternative. What's your response to that?
Hello?
Chandrika?
Yeah. Can I be heard?
Yes, we can. Your 1 minute.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So very quickly, I'll try to raise the 3 points I wanted to raise within this 1 minute. Your question previously, Paddy, on the CSO, the potential of the CSO, and how far would I stretch the alternate route to provide protection for victims of trafficking. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of government CSO engagement or partnership. I don't know, I mean, I'm speaking for, some of the countries in the region. We have some sort of culture where government is reluctant to work closely with CSOs. But I think the strength in combating trafficking and protecting the victims lies in how strong the partnership is between government authorities and CSOs, and also private sector. I think it's important we don't forget the meaningful role that private sector can play in sort of supporting the measures in protecting victims. Very quickly, one other thing I wanted to point out was, I mean, we always look at the preliminary victimization of a traffic victim. But look at also, I think we need to push the bounds and look at the potential for a trafficked victim to end up as an offender as well. If for example, a traffic victim has been repatriated into the country during this COVID pandemic, and that person does not have meaningful livelihood opportunities available, they can be susceptible to petty, crime and petty offenses, and thereafter he or she may not be recognized as a victim, and not be recognized for that sort of re-victimization, but would be recognized as an offender and thrust into the criminal justice system as an offender. So I think it's important that we look at these aspects as well. And one other point, Patty, do we have any another opportunity to bring it up, or can I bring it up here?
Do you mind to just put it in the chat box, as Jerome will be giving his last minute, because we will have
sure. I will.
Thank you,
okay.
Thank you again, Chandrika, for those additions. Jerome, your 1 minute.
Yeah, I won't be taking too long, but I want to emphasize on the role that civil society and the academe has to do with all of this. A decade ago, rights-based approach in handling victims, these are bywords that are spoken among CSOs and academe only. But now it's like a byword among non-government, among government agencies, and even among the UN. So it kind of speaks to how the power of civil society and the academe on modeling new ideas, serving as laboratories for innovations, telling the environment by which we can discuss and elaborate on these ideas, and simply trying to find a better way to do things. That's where we are good at, and that's our strength. Not to be contented on something, try to innovate, try to use technology, and I think that should be the challenge for us, especially in this post-COVID world where everything will be changing. It's not the same world that we woke up in March 2020. It's going to be a different world. So that's a challenge for us. It's going to be difficult, but I think we should also be animated for this, CSOs, academies, and all of the people here in the room, that we are going to have this opportunity to remake a world where migrant workers can be safer and can have a better life. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. And Paddy, you are doing a very good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerome. I wish I could shorter it all, but just to say that we have a fantastic team behind the organization, from the 3 organizations that have been running this Global Compact for Migration webinars. This is the 10th in a series of 23. So we have very interesting Tuesdays to go until we hit February. But I think you've ended us on a good note, talking about, new ideas, new means, but dealing with a very old and complex problem of trafficking. And of course, it would take joint cooperation across the board, and a cooperation that also takes care of the details and the depth of the issue. The complexities as well have to be well understood, like everybody else has pointed out, and as well as looking of how else can we deal with this issue, and to make sure that the traffickers at the end of the day are not the winners, and to make sure that justice is served to those migrants that go through the system, and that, at the end of the day, that migrants remain well protected. So on that note, we'll have to close the webinar. A big thank you to all our panelists, our 5 panelists who joined us. Chandrika, thank you for being here. Jerome, thank you for being here. Moomina, thank you for joining us. Anusha, and lastly but not the least, Bandana, thank you for joining us. And now I will like to close this session, and we will immediately go through to the next session, which is part of the international conference that we have been holding between the 2nd to the 5th of November, that looks at migration, diaspora, and sustainable development. And we have special sessions that we're calling Migrant Achievers. So please feel free to stay in the room. More people are joining in the room, but just the context is going to change. So thank you for joining us, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you to the panelists again. Bye-bye.
Dr. Sen, you can start. Unmute, please. Unmute, please. Dr. Sen, you can start. Unmute.
Okay, okay. Good evening, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure to be part of this incredible journey where we've been, constantly over these few days, we've been discussing the various migrant issues. And it's also incredible that people from across the world are here with us today. And everywhere, it's also so amazing to see how we are connected. So the problems that are happening in a Calcutta gully is repeated in the UAE, as is seen in London. And I'm talking about the previous session, which I was chairing. So the problems are so similar and yet so dissimilar. It kind of adds to the fact what we understand and yet tend to forget, that we are all connected in such basic manners. And yet we create differences and we create problems without quite realizing that each one of us is connected in such incredible manners. So today's session promises to be something very, very unique, where we are honoring migrant achievers. And it's no mean feat to make a mark once you've migrated from one place and gone to another place. All this while we were talking about people who have, the trauma and the travails of the migrants, which I'm sure the achievers too have faced, the discrimination, which again, I'm sure the achiever also would have faced. And yet these people stand up tall and they've made such an incredible name for themselves. So I'm very proud and privileged to welcome one such incredible achiever. I can see him here, Mr. Victor Acosta, and I will give an introduction to Mr. Acosta. Victor Acosta is the founder and director of Plus Core Business Solutions, a Houston-based firm that provides clients with solutions on project management, cost reduction, process and productivity improvements, business plans, and strategic planning. He's an industrial engineer with a master's in business administration with a focus in finance from Tec de Monterrey, one of the most prestigious private universities in Latin America. He's certified as a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and has more than 30 years of solid experience as an organization and efficiency manager, cost accounting manager, and a continuous improvement project manager. He was the controller of a transnational company in Mexico, where he acquired extensive experience in the finance field. He has been implementing continuous improvement initiatives to improve products, services, and processes, identifying for streamlining work and reducing waste in the value chain. He had the opportunity to lead projects in Germany, Hungary, Netherlands, China, India, Brazil, Mexico, and the United States in areas such as manufacturing, logistics, sales, purchasing, and finance. As a project facilitator, he has used several tools such as 5S, Anden, bottleneck analysis, continuous flow, Gemba, the real place, Heljunka, level scheduling, just-in-time, Kaizen, Kanban, KPIs, performance indicators, Muda, waste, overall equipment effectiveness, and so on. He also counts with more than 15 years of experience in creating business models for new and existing companies, with his wide experience in manufacturing, project management, business management, and finance. He also helps entrepreneurs to ground their business ideas, helping them on the decision-making process by creating feasibility studies and business plans for existing companies. He leads a process with key personnel to create a strategic plan and infinite goals. He also identifies success factors and key performance indicators that allow for the company to focus on what is really critical and what is important to business. So he creates business plans for entrepreneurs looking for investors, loans, or an immigration visa. He was the president of Exatech Houston, an alumni association of more than 500 professionals that graduated from Tec de Monterrey and live in the greater Houston area. In addition, Victor provides coaching to small business entrepreneurs through neighborhood centers, a non-profit organization that provides resources, education, and connection to capital to help low-income entrepreneurs to start or expand a business. I'm sure this barely speaks for the kind of achievement that this gentleman already has. And what really intrigued me is the fact that he reaches out to people who are starting out in life. So without further ado, I'm sure all of you are waiting to listen to Mr. Victor Acosta, who will take us through his journey and tell us a little about himself and his journey. Welcome aboard, Mr. Acosta. It's over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. And what I can tell you, I'm already living for over 20 years in United States. And it has been a journey, as you said before. Actually, the first time I have experience with other countries, I was still working in Mexico for a company. So I had the opportunity to travel to many places, implementing different projects in different organizations. And it was quite difficult, especially I remember one time when I was implementing something in New York. Every time I was visiting a company, I had somebody local, an engineer, to mirror what I was doing. And sometimes you can see in their faces, like sometimes like, a Mexican is coming and telling me what to do. And this is the kind of challenges that you need to face and to prove them that you are as smart as they are. I mean, there is no difference. And I always say it doesn't matter where are you coming from, even what school are you coming from. What makes the difference is the person, not the university and not the race that you represent. It's basically the person itself, the one that really makes the difference. And I had different experiences, also the opposite. I mean, a lot of people that really believe in your projects. And in my whole life, including me and my wife, have been helping other people. So that's why we are involved in nonprofit organizations here locally to help other low-income entrepreneurs who want to open a business, people that don't have a legal document to live in the United States, but they live here and they want to open a business. We also are helping people to, when they don't have the money, also we try to provide them some tools to find a way to get the money they need. So in our experience, as professionals, we are helping people with money that are coming from other countries to get a visa. But also, I mean, for these people, they can easily have $500,000 for investment. But locally, when we help these low-income people, for them, $10,000 is a lot of money. And we are trying to help them to create their business plan in order for them to get the loan. No matter if they have a legal document to live in the United States, no matter their credit score, we're trying to help them all the way around. I don't know if you have any questions so I can answer. I will be happy to answer any kind of questions.
Okay, do you want to take the questions right away, or do you want to speak a little about the work that you do?
Yes, I can talk about what I do.
Just through your journey, I think what people are really keen to learn here is that how you being who you are. You were talking about you being a Mexican and how people react to you at some point of time. So maybe some personal anecdotes, something about how what you would have faced and how that perception has completely changed now that you are who you are. Would you want to share some anecdotes vis-a-vis that?
Yes, of course. I would like to say I came to US through a visa as a professional, and I started working for companies locally. And later, actually to be exact, in year 2014 is when I decided to become an entrepreneur, to work by myself. And while working for companies, I remember, as many of you, I mean, English is my second language, and obviously it's not perfect and never will be perfect. And I remember one time when I was implementing a project in a company in Chicago. And I remember that I was in front of over 300 people, and the engineer that was assigned to work with me to mirror what I was doing, I said something wrong in English. I don't remember what word I was using, but absolutely was not the right word. And this person that was next to me started laughing about what I was saying. And you can imagine I was in front of 300 people and somebody next to me was laughing. So what I did at that time, and I remember I didn't think about it, I did it immediately. I talked to this engineer and said, I'm sorry, if I say something wrong, I would really appreciate if you can let me know so I can improve my English. But let me tell you something. I said, please come over and continue doing the presentation that I've been giving here. And at that time, he was really, he didn't expect that reaction from me. So he was like, no, you can continue. And I said, the reason I'm here, I was telling him, it's not because of my English, it's because of what I know, what I'm telling everybody here. So if you feel capable, please come to the front and you are the one who will explain what I'm saying. Believe it or not, from next day on, this person was the best friend I ever had in that company. So this is the kind of challenges that, I mean, I see a lot of people that I can believe that most of us don't speak English as first language, and English is the language for business. So don't be afraid to speak your mind and let other people know that we are very capable. I mean, as I said at the beginning, it's not about where you're coming from. It's not about your roots. It's more about you as a person who makes the difference. So I saw people that graduated from Harvard and other organizations, and they are not smarter than you. I can tell you that. I have experience with people from many countries, and I have seen people that graduated from public schools, but that person makes really the difference.
You're so right. It's not what you wear, it's not what you speak, it is who you are and what you're capable of bringing to the table. So that's what really matters, fag end of the day. And that's such a wonderful example of how you made a friend out of a person who initially thought the English was bad and therefore laughed. If any of you have any question, I would be grateful if you put it in the chat and I could call you and then you could maybe ask it live, but put the questions on the chat so that I know that you have queries.
I think there is a question from Abdul, who was raising hand.
I'm sorry, I was not able to see him. Abdul, please feel free to ask the question. I will be able to register it if you put it in the chat, because I might not be able to see a raised hand with so many people being here. Abdul, do you want to ask the question? Okay, I think I'll take the conversation forward till Abdul comes on board, or anybody else. Please put your questions on the chat. That will Mr. Acosta, would you want to tell us a bit about what are you doing in terms of, you were saying that, and your brief bio note that I read out, you help people become entrepreneurs. So is there a specific way you identify the people who you think you want to help, or how does this whole thing work? Can any young person walk across to you and say, okay, I have a business proposition, will you entertain that person? Or it has to come via some channel to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, my wife and I always believe in helping other people. So, this is karma. I mean, when you help other people, that help comes to you in many, many ways. Not necessarily by money, but many, many ways. And we experience a lot of good things because of karma. We believe in that. So my wife and I started helping other people, entrepreneurs by our own. But sometimes we need to understand that when you give something for free, sometimes people really don't really get the value of that service that you are providing. So we always had that challenge. So in year 20, I think year 20, at the end of year 2014, I knew about a nonprofit organization here in Houston, which actually is the largest nonprofit organization in Texas, who was trying to do something about entrepreneurs. They didn't have a clue what to do. So we reached them and start talking to them, and we helped them to create the whole infrastructure. And as of today, they already have 6 employees working as small business advisors. Well, we created the curricula, we created all the material, and we're still helping them. Every Saturday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., we are giving webinars or seminars, I mean, before the pandemic, webinars, letting other entrepreneurs know about how to become an entrepreneur, giving some training on financial for non-financial people, about marketing, sales, all kind of materials. And we also provide classes. So we have 10-week classes where people understand how to create a business or how to take their business to another level. And now we are helping people through this organization. And most of the services are for free, but they need to follow this process, because this way they really understand that what we are giving them is for free in a way, but it's not free actually. They need to do some homework, and they need to help us to create their business plan. And in that way, we have been very successful. So we have many, many examples of small business owners who have been able to open their business or take their business to another level.
That is really wonderful. I have a question here from Camellia. Camellia, do you want to ask it yourself, or do you want me to read this out? Since you're right here and I can see you, maybe you ask your question.
Yes, I'm here. Hello. And well, I am asking these questions because I know Victor, and I interviewed him. We talked a couple of years earlier. So I was thinking about his experience as a founder of the Network of Mexican Talents in Houston. And he was telling me the time that we had the opportunity to talk about how he tried to help, the undocumented Mexican workers, the ones who wanted to have their own company, and he was teaching courses of entrepreneurship to less fortunate migrants. So I was thinking maybe he could talk about how sometimes professionals try to help this community of undocumented workers, and to tell us about how they cooperate. There is a difference between the skilled and unskilled diaspora always, and the unskilled diaspora sometimes says, oh, these people are so fortunate, they don't want to help us anymore. But Victor is a case of wanting to help any kind of diaspora, not just Mexican. So yes, if you could talk more about it.
That is so wonderful. Yes, over to you, Victor.
Yes, and thank you, Camelia. Nice to see you here. And thank you for inviting me. You were the one that invited me to this event. Yes, actually, one of the things that we as an alumni association, that today we are over 2,500 people, professionals that graduated from Tec de Monterrey that are living in the greater Houston area. And part of our mission is obviously to socialize between all of us here, but also trying to give something back to our community. So we created committees. So we have a committee, and I am in charge of that committee at that moment, which is the entrepreneur committee. So what we're trying to do here is to help other low-income entrepreneurs to get their business in place. And also we try to push young students to finish their college degree, because something that we learned many, many times, the main challenge they have are their own parents. And the problem is not that the parents, they don't want the student to finish college. The problem is the parents, they don't know the rules. They don't know the language. So we created a program that is called Yes, I Can Go to College. And in this program, we were giving some advice to every single student. So every professional was helping one or two students, trying to solve some of the issues that they are facing, questions they have. The problem here in the United States with the education is that high schools, they concentrate on people that have really high score. So they try to accommodate those students in great universities, because that's how the high schools are rated. So that's why people that doesn't have really good education score, normally high schools, they don't pay attention to them. And these are the students we are helping, especially the Hispanic community, whose parents are low income and also don't speak the language. So what we are pushing is to help them to finish their college degree. And also on entrepreneurs, we had the opportunity to help. I have a few examples, like one lady that was opening a bakery. She had been working from home for many, many years. And she came to us through Baker Ripley, nonprofit organization. We were able to help her to create a business plan, to create a feasibility study, to define at what moment she was able to rent a location, at what moment she was able to pay employees, and to start their business officially with a legal name and with everything in place. As of today, after 3 or 4 years, she opened her business. She just opened her second location, and she is already, she had, I think, over 16 employees right now. So we have several cases like that, helping people for moving from informal business to a formal business.
That's really fascinating. And since you were talking about students, this is a thought that just flashed through my mind. So a lot of students faced enormous hardship during the pandemic situation, because these are students without too much money. They were there, and suddenly the colleges decided that they want to evacuate the hostels. So students faced a lot of problems. So was your organization able to reach out and take care of some of them? Because for 2-3 months, some kids were locked out, and some organizations decided to give them food. It was happening across US, Canada, so many places, actually, UK. So did you face any such thing, or was your organization able to reach out to any such student?
Yeah, actually now, because of the pandemic, we have to slow down what we have been doing, because sometimes it's not that easy to do that through internet. But yes, especially with the entrepreneurs are the ones that we have to create different business models for the classes, because always, as you know, there is nothing like having students face to face, so you can let them know about the class and learn. But when you have the people in front of the computer, and I will say the big challenge that we have with entrepreneurs is that in many cases, most of the students don't have a computer. So they have to follow the class through their telephone. so the mobile phone. So it's not that easy. And then the material that sometimes you ask them to print something, they don't know how to do it. So we have been facing that kind of challenges, but we were able to solve those through creating some questionnaires in internet and train them on how to do that. But I will say from the perspective of small business entrepreneurs, we were able, I just finished last week a class for 10 weeks for businesses that have been already in place and they want to go to the next level. So what we do with this 10 weeks training class is giving them a brief explanation of what they can expect, let's say, from their accountant. Because in many, many cases, small business entrepreneurs, they have no clue about financials and they don't know what to ask. So in many cases, the only time they know about their financials is at the beginning of the year when they are preparing their taxes. So that's why we are focusing on letting them know that these are the kind of reports that you can ask your accountant in order for you to really manage your business financially.
Thank you so much, Mr. Acosta. There's one more question for you, but I think we can, take that later from Badshah Sarkar and Sabina Yasmin. Both of you hold on to your thought. My colleague Raula is here, and she's going to introduce us to the next achiever. And towards the close of it, we will have a brief discussion where I think many of your other queries are going to be answered. So over to you, Raula.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sen, for this, and what an amazing session, and what a great stories and energies in this session. And to be honest, I couldn't be more excited about our next achiever. And this is not only because he is the father of a very close friend, but because our next achiever is actually somebody who is very positive, who has a very fun spirit, and who's actually a very genuine soul. I think these are the words that will describe best Mr. Gopinath Nair. Anyone who knows him already can get to know his fun spirit. He's always smiling, he's always engaging, and he's always happy. But he is also somebody who has been a migrant, and who has been a migrant for a very long time, actually. For more than 35 years, I think, and we'll get to hear the real story. And he is somebody who is a self-made man, somebody who started from a humble beginning, but actually went on to work very hard and also to make it in life. So I'm very, very happy to be engaging in this session with Mr. Gopinath and doing this as a dialogue, because we've always had these kinds of dialogues, and we thought it would be a very good idea if we actually do this dialogue one more time, but instead of doing it privately, why not do it publicly with everybody else and have the participation and have this kind of a fun energy and engagement. I mean, let me just start with this question, and here is my struggle. I think in our circles, you are really known as that. So how do we start by calling you for this session? Should I call you Mr. Nair? Should I call you Uncle? Should I call you Gopinath? How should I call you?
Just call me Gopi, Rola.
Gopi, perfect. That is great. Okay, so Gopi, you've left to Qatar in the 1970s, I think. If I'm not mistaken, you left in 19...
Yes, in mid 70s, but I will go back to the history a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. That happened in 1967 when I was 17 years old. I migrated to Bombay. My first migration was to Bombay within India. Moved from my home state of Kerala after doing my high school education. And the purpose of migrating to Bombay was to look for a job and to find a livelihood. And, Bombay is a commercial hub of India. It's for anybody, it's easy to find a job. But with my minimum education, it was not easy. But believe me, I found one within 3 months. I landed in Bombay. That happened when I was 17 years old. I appeared for the first job interview, I was scared. And now I'm 71. I'm sitting in a webinar for the first time in my life. I'm not scared, but I'm with you and others. You know, I just heard Victor, wonderful stories. I have totally different stories to talk about. Well, the job I found in Bombay paid me $2 a month. And I worked in that organization for about 3 years, moved out, joined another organization where my starting salary was equivalent to something like $10. I spent 4 years in that company, for 4 to 5 years in that company. And my last salary in that company after almost 8 years was about $25 per month. That's not enough to have a decent or a comfortable life in Bombay. So I started asking myself, what next? But I found the answer. Rome is not built overnight. Have patience. Things will work out in your favor. Gain experience. You can go up the ladder and you can improve upon your living standards. Well, I used to stay when I was getting this, something like this $25 a month. I was staying with 6 others in a 1-room kitchen apartment, rented apartment, where I used to sleep on dining table to make space for others to sleep on the floor. You know, so at that time, we are firm believers in God, and by the grace of God, I got an opportunity in the Middle East. And that,
I mean, so Gopi, can I ask you? So I mean, you were describing how life was back in India and your first job, and how difficult it was to get a job, and then there was this opportunity to go in the Middle East. And you know, we all know how, you know, I think this was in the 70s, 75. The Middle East was a different place, a difficult place, still is until today. I think a very difficult place.
Yeah.
So there must have been so many challenges there.
I had absolutely no clue about the country where I am going, about the organization where I am going to work. I had no clue about the terms and conditions under which I will be asked to work. But I told myself, if you don't take this opportunity, if you don't take that risk now, you will never be able to achieve something. So I took that risk, and the job opportunity originally came for my brother. And he gave it to me saying that he is not interested to leave the country because he was very well employed and he was more than happy with his job. So the person who came so the person who, and my brother was with a family man, he was settled in life. So he didn't want to disturb his family life as well as his well-established job. So the person who came to interview me from the company in the Middle East, he said, can we meet you at my place of residence in Bombay on a Sunday morning? I said yes. And then he wanted to meet me at 8 o'clock because he wanted to go out around 9:30, 10 after breakfast. So he said, let's meet at 8. So I went and found the place where he was living few minutes before 8 o'clock. But I waited outside this apartment where he was living for a few minutes and then went back to the door and rang the bell at 8 o'clock in the morning. This gentleman who opened the door, are you Gopinath? I said, yes. He looked at the watch and he said, you got the job.
So punctuality actually got you
punctuality, yes. So I
Wow.
learned a lot from that minute. And it took about a month for the organization to process my employment visa and organize my the contract and things like that. And I joined the company in 1976 in the Middle East. I joined the company as an executive secretary, and I was initially given an employment contract on a bachelor's status for a 2 years period. So it was like I knew my job is only for 2 years. I went there, and because of my hardships and in the living condition in Bombay, something I had in mind, I need to own a roof on my head, which I can call my home. And believe me, that ambition was fulfilled within the first 2 years of my employment in that organization. I owned an apartment in Bombay. This
And what,
I could not.
if I can ask you this, okay, so within the first 2 years, you've gotten the first thing off the list, you owned the home. What was the second thing on your list?
Well, then I realized within the 2 years, I realized that the going is good. The employer was looking after me, and I was, of course, no strings attached, other than my brother and mother who lived in Mumbai. Then I thought, okay, you have a house to live, but you need to go back and look for a job. So I was not prepared for that. And the organization was prepared to give me continuous contract for indefinite period. So it's like every 2 years, they would give me a new contract with new terms, with new salaries and benefits, and so on. So I continued for 32 years in that organization, renewing my contract on a 2-yearly basis. So I went there for 2 years, 30 years was bonus for
30
me.
years later, so you are still there. It's amazing.
Yes.
Gopi, can I ask you, I mean, 30 something years in Qatar, it's such a long time, and I am in Qatar right now, and we know how Qatar is. It's not necessarily the easiest place to settle in. If I can ask you to remember kind of 2 moments that imprinted on you, one, a negative moment, a very difficult moment that you've had to live, and another one that's really positive in those 30 something years, what would you say are
Yeah,
these
the
2
negative followed by the positive within no time.
Really? Okay,
Yeah,
I'm curious now.
The negative was that I went there as a bachelor, and 4 years after working in that company, I got married, came back to India on holiday, I got married. And my wife and son, I had a son, well, we had to wait only for a year to have a son. And it took for almost 7 years, my wife and son could not join me in Qatar. 7 years after marriage. They were living in India with my wife's parents, and I was called as a married bachelor, living in Qatar. But then the reason when I asked for the family status, the family visa and things like that, the company said that you were hired on a bachelor status, and therefore we cannot consider giving you a family status. So I continued for working as a married bachelor for 7 years. And the life we had was through hundreds of letters, exchange of photographs, telephone conversation, and so on. And every time when my wife opens a letter from me, she will look for the word visa, family visa in that letter. If she doesn't find that 2 words in that, then she will keep the letter to be read later on.
And were these love letters, Gopi? What was in those
Oh
letters?
yes, sort of, but you know, we didn't have enough time to love each other, you know, because we were living in 2 different countries. We spent you know, sort of a month's time every year when I used to come to India on holiday. So after 7 years, when I thought it's enough, I had a reasonable saving. I have a place to live in India. I can come back, live in my house, and find a job, and a good job. Till such time I find one, I have enough saving to live. And at that point in time, I took a call. I gave an ultimatum to the organization I worked. I said, give me family status or allow me to go home. And Rola, you won't believe, within 24 hours, I got my family status.
Wow.
Yeah. And in a month's time, my wife and son joined me in Qatar.
And this is kind of the highlight, right? This
Yeah,
is the happiest.
the highlights. The 7 years of married life, living there as a bachelor, living on communication with my wife was the worst time. And all this has happened, I would say, overnight. And since then, there was no looking back. That was the best time of our life.
And I mean, I think there is something here to explain to everybody who's listening in, because you said to allow me to leave. And back then it was, you know, there were these exit visas and people were supposed to be, you know, to get permission in order to leave the work that, you know, where they used to work. And this is no longer the case, luckily. But just to also explain that this was really kind of the difficulties people had to face in Qatar and elsewhere in the region. So it's really, really fascinating to kind of, you know, hear that at that time, you know, you were able to push through, you know, being able to bring the family and all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, you spoke about family, Gopi, and I want to ask you this because you are somebody who, you know, started modestly, but retired in a very good position in the company where you worked. So you've really achieved something on the career front. But I want to ask you this as well, and I think you can give us a reflection. How, you know, our generation, we are like 30 something, we're very young, we're very driven, we want to make it in life. And we think of success maybe in terms of career, but what's your, you know, your experience in life? What do you think success is? Where should we look when we seek success and we are so driven in life?
Well, for me, in my career, for me, I started as an executive secretary, and in 30 plus years, I became the head of administration in that organization. I found it an achievement for myself. And when I grew up the ladder professionally, my salary also, my income level has also gone up. So that's one thing I take as an achievement. And then when you talk about success, I see my success through my son. Because I was able to work there and make a decent income, I was able to give the best of education to my son. And I actually wanted to make him an engineer, but he decided to take a different route. And he decided to become an international civil servant within the United Nations, working for the on the migrant rights, while inspired by my life in the Middle East as an immigrant. And he has proven himself, and he has been there within that UN system for last several years. And that's what I call my success too. But that success was not easy. We had our own failures, trials, tribulations, and whatnot. But I always believed Nothing comes easy. You work hard for it. You get rewarded. And end of the day, be happy and keep smiling for the rest of your life. And that's what I try to do these days.
Amazing, amazing, Gopi, really. And I think we are all, you know, you are all very inspired by you. We are always inspired by your smile, inspired by your laugh. And I think it's just amazing to hear from you, you know, that the challenges, but also that, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense of, despite the challenges, despite the difficulties, you know, things work out. And if people, you know, persevere and, you know, have faith and have this positive energy that I think you kind of, you are contagious in that way. You know, you give a lot of hope and you give a lot of, you know, positivism. And I really thank you for this. It's been wonderful to listen to you, to listen to the story. So thank you for being with us and sharing the story. And hopefully we'll hear more stories, whether privately or publicly.
I should thank you and others, you know, who have been very kind to make me part of this webinar. It was as I said, my first experience. And I'm very excited about it. And thank you once again.
And we hope it won't be the last.
Hopefully, yes. Yes. Thank you, Rola.
Thank you, Gopi. Thanks so much. Back to you, Dr. Sen.
Thank you, dear.
So thank you so much. It was wonderful listening to you, Gopi, your stories, how you settled out and how you're now so proud of your son. So yeah, great success stories these. And of course, Victor, with the way he has been extending his hand towards everybody who needs it, I think that in itself is phenomenal, that, you know, you have established yourself and then you go out there and try to benefit the others who have probably not been as lucky as you, or who are probably, you know, who are not as settled as you. And I think that is phenomenal. So this has been so exciting, honoring two very eminent people who, being migrants, having faced major challenges, have not only established themselves, but they have been looking out for the Gen Next and trying to do good by them and inspire them positively. Excellent stories. So with this, I think we'll call an end to this session. Thank you so much, Raula, and everyone else who asked questions, who have been here with us throughout. It's been a fascinating session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Sen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dr. Ruchi.
Personally, I myself have benefited out of your work, ma'am. So it's a great honor that you are chairing this session. Ma'am, I invite you to chair the session. Floor is all yours. Thank you very much. Ma'am, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Rakesh. Thank you so much. Do we have Bridge sir around? Bridge Maharaj sir?
Hi.
Yeah, hello sir. Hello.
Bridge,
Sir.
I'm on. Yes.
Yeah. Welcome to the session, sir. Thank you so much for sparing time and coming here, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
You are helping me, right?
So, yeah.
Because you are. It's good evening from my side. It's 4:45 in the evening in Durban, South Africa, and I'm aware I'm talking to people in different time zones. I greet my friend and colleague Chandrika Karunaratna, and I think Rakesh Ranjan. Some names I do recognize, and others I'll get to know during this session. I'm trying to download the program. I'll just be a minute. And just to do a roll call and check that it's quite a few. There's about 8 presentations. That's what I saw just now.
Yes, sir.
And Ruchi, can you help me? Can we check if all 8 are here and then makes life a little bit easier? We know how we're going to proceed.
Yeah, sir. So we can spell out the names for those. So
yes, please. Can you please do that, Ruchi?
Yeah, just a sec, sir.
I have made co-host. I'm making co-host others.
Yeah. Rakesh, can you just spell out? I'm having some issues at my side, so I couldn't open this thing.
I've got the names. Dr. Ananya Chakraborty.
She's there.
She's here. Okay.
I'm
good.
so sorry, sir.
No, it's okay. No, Olga Zeliskaya. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. Olga, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Right. 2. Then we have Dr. Barua.
Dr. Barua, are you there?
Yes, she's there.
Okay.
She's there.
Then, Hiba Mohammed, Amira, and then Ali Sadiq. There's a whole group here.
Present here.
Hiba Mohammed.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay. Sushmita Bhattacharya.
Sushmita Bhattacharya, are you there? Let's check. Rakesh, is Sushmita there?
Okay, I'll keep track.
I'm here.
Neha Rai.
Not here.
Not? Sushmita is also not here?
Okay, 2. Miss Zeba.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm here.
Zeba is here, okay. And then Ruchi is here. Okay, so we got, I think 6 presentations. Is that right, Ruchi?
Yes, sir.
And we're going to go roughly, was it 12 minutes? What's your sense?
Yeah, 10 to 12 minutes, sir, because we're already quite late for this session.
That's right. We are running late, and so it depends whether we keep Indian time or South African time. Now, South African time is very English. So roughly 10 to 12 minutes. So let's go. All people's introductions and all are in the abstract book, so I'm not going to take up time.
Sir, just give me an honor to introduce you to our participants, sir. So let me have the honor of introducing you.
Let them Google me. Don't introduce.
No, sir. Just give me a second. I'll just tell about you to the participants, because they might be not knowing few things about you. So just give me a sec before we formally initiate the sessions and presentations and all. Okay. So this session will be chaired by Professor Brejma